Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Now, we've been talking a lot about lightsabers in our recent videos, which is kind of ironic, guys, because let's be honest, I'm not really a lightsaber kind of guy. I'm more of a lure your enemies into the air vault with promises of friendship and Ewok jerky and then kind of vent them out into space. There's a lot less risk associated with my style of fighting. Now, I do recognize that a lot of our viewers are force sensitive or are on a controlled substance, same thing. So I thought it'd be a good idea to go through what type of forms of lightsaber combat you should specialize in. And so today we're going to be going through some common combat scenarios you might encounter and talk about which forms will serve you the best. So a Jedi or a Sith can't slow down time. That's a really big misconception that people have about Star Wars. I'm sure some ancient Sith Lord figured it out and then got trapped inside of a tomb in some outer rim backworld planet. That always happens, but for the average Jedi and Sith, they'll never get to that, level in Force abilities. So most Force users instead rely on precognition to anticipate incoming danger, like blaster bolts, vibroblades, or your ex-wife who technically owns the half of your Corellian freighter where the hyperdrive rests. It's not really a perfect system of defense using precognition, and it takes a whole lot of practice to perfect, especially when you are on an open battlefield surrounded by enemy fire and explosions. During the Battle of Petranaki Arena, 212 Jedi went up against an army of droids, and we can see just how vulnerable these Force users can be in these types of situations. Prior to this battle, the Jedi Order maybe lost a handful of Jedi every year, usually due to some diplomatic mission or peacekeeping mission gone wrong. During the Battle at Petranaki, the majority of the Jedi rescue team was wiped out and only a few dozen survived. What's the reason why this happened? Well, most of the Jedi lacked proficiency in one type of lightsaber combat form, Form 3. Form 3, also known as Sarusu, the Way of the Mynock, was a defensive lightsaber form that was developed from the most basic Form 1 blast deflection training. The style involves really tight blade work, which creates the most efficient defensive shell a Force user can muster. During the Golden Age of the Republic, Form 3 became very popular due to the fact that Jedi during this period usually fought combatants armed with blasters. Therefore, there weren't really any Sith around for them to duel with in the first place. But again, it's very important to mention that the proficiency of your average Jedi really differed. Those at the top of the Jedi Order like Mace Windu, Anakin, and Obi-Wan Kenobi were light years ahead of lesser Jedi Knights that accompanied them on the battlefield. But yes, generally speaking, when the blaster bolts start flying, Form 3 is the way to go. Also, if you can dual wield or use a saber staff, that makes Form 3 even harder to penetrate. Form 3 is also pretty useful against multiple attackers with melee weapons, although there are certain forms that are great at ripping apart Form 3, so we'll be talking about those a little later on. Now, the Palpatine defeat all of those Jedi Masters so quickly when they came to arrest him at his office. We should probably do a full video about this. But one of the reasons why is because the Jedi Masters that accompanied Mace Windu were skilled in combat, but not particularly used to fighting against a full-blown Sith Master. Yes, Palpatine was extremely powerful, and perhaps only Mace Windu and Yoda could stand up against him in a duel. But Palpatine also used a very rare and dangerous lightsaber combat known as Form 7, or Juyo. Juyo is actually called a Sith lightsaber form by a lot of its practitioners because the users of this form usually are channeling hate, anger, and passion to kind of fuel all of their attacks. To a novice, one might mistake in Form 7 with Form 4 Ataru, the Way of the Hawkbat. Form 4 involved unpredictable and energetic attacks, usually utilizing force-assisted acrobatics, but it was focused more on outflanking an enemy. Form 7 also featured acrobatic moves, but there was a malicious grace and efficiency to the form that allows the user to fall into a trance of unlimited force power, which allows them to viciously break apart any defense. Sidious's apprentice Darth Maul actually used Form 7 against Qui-Gon Jinn very efficiently. Unfortunately for Qui-Gon Jinn, his Form 4 was not as effective in a confined space and also very energy intensive, and because Maul had so much hate inside of him, his Form 7 gave him unlimited power and energy, which helped him win the duel. So how does one actually confront a master of Form 7? Well, your best bet is actually to use Form 7 against them. If you are a Jedi and want to avoid using too much of the dark side, you can look at the alternative Form 7 style known as Vapad, which was created by Mace Windu. Vapad users still channel the dark side through them, but their body serves as a conduit that's less affected by its degrading effects. And usually the users of Form 7 are extremely disciplined and know how to fight the dark side, like Mace Windu. It was a very dangerous form for most Jedi to use, and therefore not really recommended. But Form 7, whether you're using Juyo or Vapad, was designed for one-on-one combat, so if you do have some backup, it could help you turn the tide against a Form 7 practitioner. But that also really depends on how in tune you are with your backup. Extra swordsmen can be a great help, or they could just be another body flailing around in the battlefield getting in your way. Jedi are not only going to encounter Sith warriors, they're also going to encounter Sith assassins. Instead of just relying on pure strength and force powers, these Sith, like Count Dooku and Asajj Ventress, prefer a much more refined form of combat, Form 2 Mikasi. Form 2 Mikasi was a dueling form, and it kind of became irrelevant after the Sith were completely destroyed at the 7th Battle of Ruusan 1,000 years before the Clone Wars. For the same reason Form 3 got popular in the absence of Sith and Jedi duels, Form 2 became more or less forgotten. Form 2 Mikasi was the ultimate form for the dueling gentleman or gentlewoman. It was all about fluidity, precision, control, and economy of motion. The idea was to tire out your enemy by interrupting or redirecting the energy from your opponent's strikes and keeping them off balance by attacking their core and footing. Mikasi users also practiced a variety of vicious counters and disarmament moves. So if you're a Jedi or Sith facing someone who's using Mikasi, what kind of form do I recommend? Well, the form of a rotary blaster cannon. You see, Mikasi was only really useful for one-on-one duels. It lacked the proper defensive moves and mechanisms to protect itself from blaster fire or multiple combatants. So yeah, using a blaster in this case is a pretty good idea, although it should be mentioned that most Form 2 Mikasi users also know how to use Form 3, and they will supplement their defenses with Form 3. Obi-Wan Kenobi was never the most skilled duelist, but somehow he managed to defeat Maul, Grievous, and survive fighting Anakin and Asajj Ventress. How was he able to survive all of these situations while other Jedi clearly were not able to? It's because of that aforementioned Form 3 shell defense we were talking about. Obi-Wan Kenobi was extremely proficient in Form 3. He had taken a very important lesson from his master Qui-Gon Jinn. There was virtue in patience. However, Form 3 did have a weakness, and that was dueling forms like Form 2 Mikasi, which Count Dooku used very effectively against Obi-Wan Kenobi at least twice. The reason why this works so well is because Form 2 and Form 3 are both about tiring out the enemy. They kind of cancel each other out. And unfortunately, Form 3's lack of offensive abilities means that it's only a matter of time before a precision Form 2 strike cracks their defenses. We should really just call this section How to Defeat General Grievous. General Grievous was a cyborg with zero connection to the Force, yet somehow he was able to wield not only one lightsaber, which is hard enough for a non-Force sensitive, he was able to wield 4 lightsabers at the same time. This is because of his very advanced cyborg body, which gave him inhuman reflexes. He was also a fanatic who was obsessed with killing Jedi, so he trained quite a lot. Grievous was actually skilled in all 7 lightsaber forms, and so it's not surprising that he managed to kill over 30 Jedi throughout the course of the Clone Wars. The problem with most Jedi at the time, as we mentioned before, was there was very limited opportunities for them to duel an enemy combatant in lightsaber combat, especially a giant metallic one with 4 metal arms. Grievous was quick and extremely strong, and very few Jedi could actually absorb and continuously parry his blows. On top of that, Grievous oftentimes only fought with 2 of his limbs exposed, and then when locked into a grapple with a Jedi, he would often extend his secondary arms, outflank their defenses, and go for the kill. Grievous really had zero weaknesses when it came to close-range melee fighting. I mean, he was not only able to change his lightsaber forms constantly, he was able to change how many lightsabers he was holding and how many arms he had, and he would even occasionally throw in a blaster for good measure. Which is why no lightsaber form is going to be perfect against this brute, and that's something Obi-Wan Kenobi took a long time to realize. He fought Grievous more times than anyone. We did an entire video about it, actually. And the one way Obi-Wan Kenobi keeps surviving is by using the Force. Every time Obi-Wan is overwhelmed and about to get struck down, he blasts Grievous with the Force, and the cyborg usually runs away. You see, when Dooku created Grievous, he actually infused some Jedi blood from Sifo Dyas into his body, but unfortunately, it never gave Grievous the Force powers that he wanted. And so when confronted by the awesome power of the Force, Grievous usually has no counter. Even a novice Jedi is able to counter a telekinesis strike. Grievous was helpless. So don't let Grievous get close to you so that he can use all of his arms and lightsabers and claws. Keep him at a distance with the Force and basically pummel him with telekinesis. I wonder how powerful Anakin would have been if he had Grievous's body. Now, if you're a Jedi, there are going to be a lot of cases where you're going to have to neutralize an individual without actually killing them. This is where Form 1, or the Way of the Sarlacc, comes from. Form 1 was actually an experimental combat form designed before lightsaber-to-lightsaber combat became a thing, because it was invented before the first Sith actually emerged from exile. And the primary purpose of this form was to disarm combatants and not hurt them, as was the Jedi way. Unfortunately, a lot of those disarmaments actually led to the disarmament of arms off of the bodies of their victims, so do be careful. Well, those are my tips on what forms of lightsaber combat you should use in various combat scenarios. Now I'd like to hear yours in the comment section down below. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.